So we're given two functions, f of x and g of x, and we're asked to determine the value of f follows g of x. So the first thing we want to recognize, Caroline, is that this little symbol means follows. Now that basically means that since f follows g, we need to use the g function first. And if we use the g function first, we get square root of x minus 2. That becomes our input. So f follows g, so we're going to input the square root of x minus 2 into the f function. And this is a part of why we name functions, which we were talking about today. So the f function says take 2 times x and add 1. Well, now we see that the x is the output from the g of x function. So, therefore, this output from the g of x function is going to be substituted in for x in the f of x function. So what we'll have is 2 times the quantity square root of x minus 2 and then plus 1. Now we want to simplify this as much as we possibly can. And I would say in this case that it is simplified as much as it possibly can. We can't do any distributing because 2, we have to do the square rooting before we do the multiplication by 2. And we don't know what value of x we have, so we can't square root to multiply it by 2. And then we can't add 1 thereafter. So I would say that f follows g of x is equal to 2 times the square root of x minus 2 and then plus 1. Okay? So the other part of this question is that they want us to identify the domain of this function using interval notation. So the domain is about the x. So we have to look at what's in this rule that we've come up with. F follows g of x is equal to 2 times the square root of x minus 2. And we have to recognize that underneath the square root, we have an x minus 2. Well, you cannot square root any number that is negative. So x minus 2 must be a number that is greater than or equal to 0. Because any number less than 0 will be negative. Any number greater than or equal to 0 will have a square root. So if we solve this for 0, we would have to add 2 to both sides. And we find that x must be greater than or equal to 2. So the domain is such that x must be greater than or equal to 2. Now using interval notation, because it equals 2, we would use a bracket. But greater than means anything bigger than 2, which means we go on into infinity. And our infinities and negative infinities always get parentheses. So our domain would be anything that satisfies this interval described with interval notation here.